The stars burned cold above the battlefield of Verum Prime. Thousands of ships hung in the darkness like frozen lightning, their weapons silent for now. On the ground below, the Allied forces of 12 different species waited in their trenches. Fear sat heavy on their shoulders. The Korthax Empire had never lost a war. Their generals had conquered 600 worlds. Their soldiers fought without mercy and without retreat. Today, the Korthax brought their full strength to crush the last free planets in the galaxy. General Vethan of the Morvani people stood at the command center. His 4 eyes watched the holographic display with growing despair. The enemy outnumbered them 3-1. Their shields were stronger. Their weapons were deadlier. Every calculation showed the same result. Defeat was certain. Death was coming for them all. The other commanders gathered around him. Admiral Sorix of the Thelian fleet clicked his mandibles nervously. High Priestess Yalna of the Corvith touched her prayer beads with trembling fingers. They had all accepted that this day would be their last. They had come to die with honor, nothing more. Then the communication systems crackled to life. A new signal appeared on the sensors. Ships were approaching from the far edge of the system. The Allied commanders looked at each other in confusion. No reinforcements were expected. No other species had agreed to join their desperate fight. The ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. They were strange vessels, built with hard angles and thick armor plating. Their hulls were painted deep blue, the color of ocean depths and midnight skies. Symbols decorated their sides, symbols that none of the alien commanders recognized. These ships belonged to a species from the far reaches of the galaxy, a species that had stayed neutral in all galactic conflicts until now. They were human ships. General Vethan opened the communication channel. A face appeared on his screen, and he felt his breath catch in his throat. The human who looked back at him was female. Her skin was dark brown, her eyes were sharp like weapons, and her expression showed no fear at all. Blue paint marked her cheeks in warrior patterns. Blue armor covered her body. A crown of blue metal sat upon her head. She was Queen Elara Blackwood of the human territories, and she had brought her entire war fleet to Verum Prime. "I hope we are not too late for the battle," Queen Elara said. Her voice was calm and steady like a river that nothing could stop. General Vithan struggled to find words. "Your Majesty, the Korthax forces are overwhelming. Our defeat is certain. Why would you bring your people to die alongside us?" Queen Elara smiled, but it was not a soft smile. It was the smile of someone who had fought impossible battles before and won them all. "General, I did not come here to die. I came here to win." The Korthax commanders detected the human fleet. They laughed at the small number of ships. The humans were young in space, barely 2 centuries old among the stars. Their technology was primitive compared to the ancient Korthax Empire. Their soldiers were soft creatures made of weak flesh and breakable bones. What could such beings hope to accomplish against the greatest military force in the galaxy? Queen Elara gave her orders. Her fleet moved forward while the Allied ships stayed back. The human vessels arranged themselves in a formation that no military textbook had ever described. It looked wrong to every alien watching. It looked like suicide. The Korthax fleet opened fire. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked across space toward the human ships. The blue vessels did not dodge. They did not retreat. Their shields absorbed hit after hit while they continued forward. Damage reports filled the communication channels. Human ships were dying. Human crews were burning in the cold vacuum. But the remaining ships kept advancing. Admiral Sorix watched in horror. They are throwing their lives away. What strategy is this? What madness drives them forward? General Vethan had no answer. He could only watch as the humans pushed deeper into enemy fire. Then, something changed. The human ships reached optimal range, and Queen Elara gave a single command. "All batteries, full spread. Break their center." The human weapons fired. They were not plasma weapons like everyone else used. They were something older, something more primitive, something the Korthax had never bothered to defend against. Kinetic projectiles, solid metal slugs accelerated to impossible speeds, slammed into the Korthax shields. The shields were designed to disperse energy weapons. They could not stop physical impacts. The first Korthax ship exploded. Then the second. Then 10 more. Then 100. The Allied commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. The Korthax center formation was collapsing. Their mighty warships were breaking apart like toys in a child's angry hands. The humans had found a weakness that no one else had thought to exploit. They had remembered ancient weapons that the galaxy had forgotten. Queen Alara's voice came through the communication systems again. "Ground forces, prepare for deployment. We land in 15 minutes. The human transport ships descended through the atmosphere of Varam Prime. Anti-aircraft fire reached up to meet them. Many transports were hit. Many crashed in flames. But enough of them reached the surface. Their doors opened, and human soldiers poured out onto the battlefield. They wore blue armor. They carried weapons that roared like thunder. They moved in tight formations, covering each other, advancing step by step toward the enemy trenches. The Korthax ground forces opened fire with everything they had. Human soldiers fell. Bodies dropped into the mud and blood, but the others did not stop. They did not hesitate. They climbed over their fallen friends and kept moving forward. When their weapons ran empty, they picked up enemy weapons and kept fighting. When those weapons failed, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their fists. Queen Alara led from the front. Her blue armor was already stained with enemy blood. Her crown reflected the light of explosions. She carried a sword in one hand and a pistol in the other. Every enemy that came near her died within seconds. Her soldiers followed her like a storm follows the wind. The Korthax soldiers had conquered countless worlds. They had faced every kind of enemy the galaxy could produce. They had never faced anything like this. These humans did not fight for territory or resources. They did not fight for religious reasons or political gain. They fought because someone had asked for their help. They fought because it was the right thing to do. That kind of enemy could not be predicted. That kind of enemy could not be understood. That kind of enemy could not be stopped. The first Korthax defensive line broke. Soldiers threw down their weapons and ran. Officers tried to restore order, but found themselves abandoned by their troops. The sight of the Blue Warrior Queen cutting through their ranks had broken something inside them. They had believed themselves invincible for so long. Now that belief was shattered like fragile glass. General Vethan finally gave the order for his own forces to advance. The Allied troops surged forward, their despair transformed into hope. They joined the human assault, pushing through the gaps that Queen Alara had torn in the enemy formation. The battle raged for hours. The Korthax reinforcements arrived, but they were met by human ships that had no intention of retreating. The second wave of the enemy fleet met the same fate as the first. Kinetic rounds pierced their hulls. Human pilots rammed their damaged ships into enemy vessels rather than surrender. On the ground, Queen Alara reached the enemy command center. The Korthax general waited inside, surrounded by his elite guards. He was a massive creature, covered in natural armor plating, his body designed for war. He had personally killed over 1,000 enemies in single combat. Queen Alara faced him alone. Her soldiers secured the perimeter while she walked through the doors. The Korthax general looked down at her small frame with contempt. "Tiny creature," he growled. "You think you can defeat me? I am General Kethver. I have never lost a fight." Queen Alara removed her helmet. Sweat and blood covered her face. Exhaustion showed in every line of her body. But her eyes were still sharp, still burning with unbreakable will. "Neither have I," she said. The fight lasted only 3 minutes. General Kethver was stronger, faster, more experienced. But Queen Alara was human. She was willing to take wounds that would have stopped any other fighter. She was willing to sacrifice her safety for a single perfect strike. She moved through his defenses like water through cracks in stone. Her sword found his throat. The great general fell. The remaining Korthak's forces received word of their commander's death. They received images of the Blue Warrior Queen standing over his body. They looked at their own losses, at the impossible destruction the humans had caused, at the allied forces now surrounding them from all sides. They surrendered. The Battle of Verum Prime was over. Against all odds, against every calculation, the allied forces had won. The Korthak's empire, undefeated for 10,000 years, had been broken in a single day. General Vethan met Queen Alara as she walked back to her transport ship. Her armor was damaged. She limped from a wound in her leg, but she walked with the pride of someone who had kept her promise. "Your Majesty," General Vethan said, bowing low, "you have saved us all. How can we ever repay this debt?" Queen Alara stopped walking. She looked at the general with those sharp, tired eyes. "Remember us," she said. "Remember that when the darkness came, humanity stood with you. Remember that we asked for nothing in return. And one day, when some other world needs help against impossible odds, remember how it feels to receive that help." She continued walking. Her soldiers fell into formation around her. The human transports lifted off, carrying their wounded and their dead back to the fleet above. General Vethan watched them go. He stood there until the last blue ship vanished into hyperspace. Then he turned to face his fellow commanders, who had gathered behind him. "What manner of creatures are these humans?" Admiral Sorix asked. His voice was filled with wonder and something like fear. General Vethan thought about everything he had seen. The impossible bravery, the willingness to die for strangers, the ancient weapons that no one else remembered, the queen who fought at the front of her army like a common soldier. "I do not know what they are," he said finally, "but I know this much. I am grateful they chose to be our friends, and I would never, ever want them as our enemies." The news of Verum Prime spread across the galaxy. Every species heard the story of the Blue Warrior Queen. Every world learned how human ships had broken through unbeatable defenses. Every civilization understood the balance of power had changed forever. The Korthak's empire sued for peace. Their remaining territories broke away one by one. Worlds that had lived in fear for generations finally tasted freedom. And at the center of it all stood humanity, young and strange and terrifying in their fierce love for justice. They had entered a war that was not their own. They had bled for people they had never met. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to stand against tyranny. Queen Alara returned home to her people. She removed her blue armor and set aside her crown. She tended to her wounds and mourned her fallen soldiers. She was tired beyond words, hurting in body and soul. But when she closed her eyes at night, she smiled. Because somewhere in the stars, free people were looking up at the sky and speaking her name with gratitude. Somewhere in the darkness, children were being told the story of the day when human ships appeared like blue angels of war. The enemy lines had broken like fragile glass, and the Blue Warrior Queen had led the charge that changed the galaxy forever.